But I have my lovely assistant Molly take a video of me pumping these color-changing primed Willow-Diadem stars. I've made up 4,000 grams of Willow-Diadem comp, and I have dampened that with 10% of the non-metal weight of the comp, which is 350 grams of water. I have mixed up 1,000 grams of hard break star prime and added 75 grams of water to that. Before I dampened the Willow-Diadem comp, I ball-milled the non-metal ingredients 1,000 grams at a time, 1,000 gram batch minus the metals. I've ball-milled that for 2 hours. So now I'm pumping 16 at a time my 1-inch color changing stars for the 12-inch ball shells. I'm putting 30 grams of comp in the first layer on in the bottom of the cavities. I've sort of written about this, but I think that sometimes seeing somebody do it helps visualize it better. I've got a little dam that I made to cover up the star plate to extend the surface a little bit. My goal with each layer is to get it in there as evenly as possible. I want approximately a very same amount in each of the cavities. So this is 30 grams of the dampened hard break star prime, pretty evenly screened over the cavities. Now I'm putting the excess in pretty evenly, and I sort of look down in the holes and make sure that there's no hole that got skipped, and that's pretty good right there. Then I have determined that the actual Willow-Diadem star comp takes 270 grams per 16 hole plate. So I'm putting 135 grams in first. So I weigh 135 grams. Once again, I'm putting this in the holes as evenly as possible. Loose filled, this just about fills each cavity to the top, I have found. So this is the first 135 grams of the dampened Willow-Diadem star comp. And I sort of pack that down with the pin plate gently. I've got my dimpler here, a 1-inch diameter rod with a 3/8 inch, a slightly larger than 3/8 inch tit sticking out the end of it, about 3/16 of an inch. That creates a depression in each of the cavities to accept half of a pumped 3/8 inch color star. I mixed 350 grams of brilliant NX red-orange composition and dampen that with alcohol and pump those into 3/8 inch stars. That'll be the final color change on these pumped stars. I think because of the reduced distance from the outside of the star to that color star 3/8 inch core, I think these stars will burn for between 10 and 15 seconds. That's what I'm shooting for in a Willow-Diadem shell, 10 to 15 seconds. Of burn time before the color change. These are my little pumped stars, and I'm just putting a 3/8 inch star down into each of those cavities. Sort of pushing them down in there with the tip of the tweezers, making sure that they're centered up in there. I've determined that each 16 pin star plate full of stars made this way takes me about 10 minutes to pump after the star comps were all made and dampened. The idea behind adding the first half of the Willow-Diadem comp on top of that first layer of prime, creating the dimple, the depression, putting the color stars in there, then adding the other half of the star composition, is to get these the final color change 3/8 inch color pump stars embedded just as close as possible to dead center in these pump stars. So creating a color changing pump star, which is something that it's not commonly done. Now I'm taking the pin plate and just pushing gently down on those color stars to embed them nice and evenly, double checking visually to make sure they're all in the center of the stars, which looks good. Now I'm going to weigh out another 135 grams of my Willow-Diadem composition. The actual weights of the composition had to sort of be determined by trial and error. I pumped a 1-inch Willow-Diadem star, determined that it took about 17 grams of composition, multiplied that by 16 to determine how much composition to use for the whole star, divided that by 2, got half of the composition at 135 grams. So here's the second 135 grams of the composition. I'm evenly distributing that into each of the holes. Then I use my pin plate to depress that composition, 3/16 to 1/4 inch or so, pushing back and forth side to side to get a good even depression in each of the cavities. I put my second 30-gram load of prime on top of that. And then the stars are ready to pump. I like priming and making the color change and making the whole star all at once without having to roll multiple layers of composition on there. It's primed, it's the right size. I can make exactly the right number of stars for a shell, 250, 248 stars. These will dry literally overnight in the 150-degree drying box and be ready to use tomorrow. So to me, within the limitations of how much energy I want to put into this, the drying time, the storage time, this process is working nicely for me. Now the real bottom line test will be to see how well these stars perform in a shell. I'm pressing these at 2,000 pounds per square inch on the composition, which is about 25,000 pounds of force. That's keeping its pressure nicely now. And there's 16 of my stars primed, the color star embedded in them, ready to dry overnight in the drying box and use in a shell tomorrow or so. So far I really like this process. Thank you, Molly, for being my lovely assistant once again. Okay, Molly had a question. It looked to her like when I dumped the excess that was on the paper into the star composition bucket that I was mixing prime with the star composition, whereas in fact with the dam on here I was actually putting all of my prime composition into the holes. The excess on the paper was actually almost all, virtually all star composition. That's why I put that into that bucket of star composition. I'll put these in the drying box and proceed to the next batch. Molly had another question. She noticed that instead of a metal spacer when I was actually pumping the stars and I wanted full pressure on the star plate, she noticed I used a wood block when I was ejecting the stars. I want something a little bit forgiving, like a wood block on top of my whole stack of stuff. The ejection plate, the star plate, the spacer blocks. I want a little bit of something a little forgiving in case I apply a little too much pressure toward the end when I'm ejecting the stars. The wood block will take some of that pressure rather than bending my ejection plate or putting too much force onto my star plate. Just as a little bit of a shock absorber, pressure absorber when I'm ejecting the stars.